Hi everyone, I'm Michelle. I blog and publish patterns as From Bolt to Beauty, and I'm here talking to you about my Five Little Ghosts Runner project. Check the caption below for information about a Five Little Ghosts quilt-along and other quilt-alongs from my book, Not Your Typical Jelly Roll Quilts. This is week one, so we're actually getting to do something this week. We're going to be cutting our project. And you may be making the runner size project. That's the original project that appears in Not Your Typical Jelly Roll Quilts. Or you may be supersizing it, as I am, and making a throw size version. In order to do that, you will need the same book, Not Your Typical Jelly Roll Quilts, as well as the free expansion pack PDF. And there's a link down in the caption for where to find that. There's already a video posted for week 0, and that is just talking about the fabric pulls. So if you haven't seen that video, you might want to start there. Let's start by looking at the runner project. Here it is. It's super cute. It's very fast. The Quilt-Along takes many weeks, but you could honestly do this in a weekend without a problem. A couple things before you start cutting. If you are opening a new jelly roll, I recommend you use a sticky lint roller to roll both sides before you unwind the strips. It gets off a lot of those little pinked edges. I mean, it won't solve the problem, but it certainly will help it. See what I mean? And then I hold on to the lint roller because there will be little bits that continue to fall off, and I just like to clean them up as I go. If you are sewing the original runner size project, the cutting is pretty straightforward. Just follow the instructions in the book. There are a couple things to think about though. The first one is you should read through the project first. And if you do so, you will notice that the ghosts are made in columns. In other words, if you are using jelly roll strips, which are cut with the fabric, they are going to appear the other orientation in your final block. And so if you have a directional fabric, that could really bug you. I know it would bug me. You don't like the way they're going to look, go ahead and swap them out for different options at this point before you start cutting. The other thing to think about is starch. In general, I do not starch my projects. There are maybe 2 exceptions I can think of. If there are bias strips in the quilt top, like a lot of them, I will absolutely starch everything, and I will starch everything, foreground and background fabrics, in advance of cutting them. And here is a project. This is Myriad, also from Not Your Typical Jelly Roll Quilts, and this has a ton of bias edges, and so I did starch everything. Another situation, if I were using something other than quilting cotton, I would probably starch it. What about starching just regular quilting cotton without any bias edges? Well, I did an experiment, and let me show you what I found out. I made 2 little ghost blocks. Remember that I am making the supersize version with 20 ghosts, the throw size version. So I'm using fat quarters for my background. And I noticed that, again, I always starch before I cut. I did lose something in the cross grain. In other words, the weft threads shrank a little bit. The other direction, I had no shrinkage at all. So that's just something to keep in mind, that starching can cause some shrinkage. The other thing I noticed is that this is the fabric that I did not starch. I don't know. I would say that the block I did starch was just neater when it came to making those snowballs. Like you can see how this is a little bubbly and it's a little short in the length and the width. And I presume that's just because I sewed on the bias, and after pressing it, things just get a little wonky. Now, does that mean I'm going to make the effort to starch everything? No, because it just takes so much time. And this is how I would deal with a little a little wonkiness when it comes to piecing. Here, let's see if I can get an example for you. This is one of the blocks I did not starch, and you can see that it's a little wonky. This snowball ended up wonky. And at one point in constructing the blocks, I will be sewing that edge to a long 1.5 inch rectangle. And so the way I would deal with this discrepancy when it comes to sewing is I would pin probably here, here, and here, and just make up for that discrepancy in the seam allowance. So yes, the starch fabric was nicer to work with, but I don't think the benefits outweigh just the time it takes to starch all your fabric before sewing. Here are two completed blocks that I made. I just wanted to show you a workaround that I did because I actually didn't have fat quarters. I had width of fabric cuts that were all about 14, 15, 16 inches. They didn't have the full 18 inches. So I just went ahead and sewed two pieces of fabric together to come up with the 14.5 inch rectangle I needed. I wasn't willing to buy more fabric, and I don't think anyone will notice once this is quilted up that there's another seam there. I encountered the same problem with this black pumpkin fabric. I was short. I added some extra fabric. I didn't even bother trying to match the pattern. Once it's quilted up, I don't think anyone will notice. Thanks so much for watching my video on cutting the 5 Little Ghosts Runner project and the 5 Little Ghosts and Friends Throw Size project. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comment field below or drop me an email at frombolttobeauty@gmail.com. Thank you.